I stood frozen in the doorway of my father's office as he removed my nameplate from the desk. After working 14 years in the family construction business, building it from a small local operation into a regional powerhouse, my reward was watching Dad replace me with my younger brother overnight. "The Franklin name needs a man behind it, Magnus," he said without looking up. "Construction isn't women's work." The betrayal burned through me like acid. Everything I'd sacrificed, my relationships, my youth, even having children, gone in an instant. The Franklin construction sign had been a fixture in my life since before I could read. My earliest memories were of sitting on my father's lap as he reviewed blueprints, the smell of coffee and graphite pencils filling his home office. Harrison Franklin started with a pickup truck and a toolbox, building decks and renovating kitchens. By the time I finished high school, Franklin Construction employed 30 people and had contracts throughout the county. While other girls my age were planning for college parties, I was planning my rise through the ranks of the family business. I started answering phones during summer breaks at 16, learned bookkeeping by 18, and supervised my first project at 21. Every promotion was earned through sweat and determination, often working twice as hard as any man on the team to earn half the respect. "You have something to prove every time you step onto a job site," my father told me my first day. "Men will assume you don't belong here. Show them you do." And I did. For 14 years, I proved myself daily. I learned to operate every piece of equipment, memorized building codes, earned my contractor's license, and built relationships with suppliers and clients that doubled our business. I weathered crude jokes, dismissive comments, and constant scrutiny. When clients addressed questions to male subordinates instead of me, I answered anyway, with such authority and knowledge that they eventually started calling me directly. My father became my hero, my mentor, and my toughest critic. Harrison Franklin stood 6'3" with hands like granite and a voice that carried across construction sites without ever needing to yell. He built respect through competence, integrity, and delivering what he promised. I modeled myself after him in every way possible. "You remind me of myself," he told me on my 25th birthday, after I secured the hospital contract that put Franklin Construction in a new league. Those 6 words sustained me through countless 80-hour weeks and sacrificed weekends. My younger brother Jackson showed little interest in construction. 4 years younger than me, he gravitated toward computers and marketing, eventually getting a business degree and bouncing between tech startups in Austin. He visited during holidays, listening politely to construction stories before steering conversations toward cryptocurrency or social media trends. Dad never pressured him to join the company, seemingly content with my dedication. Last month, we celebrated 14 years since I joined full-time. Dad mentioned his retirement plans, scheduled for next year when he turned 63. Though nothing was explicitly stated, everyone assumed I would take the reins. I had effectively been running daily operations for years while Dad focused on big-picture strategy and client relationships. The morning everything changed began normally. I arrived at 6:30, reviewed project updates from our 5 active sites, and prepared for our weekly leadership meeting. At 9, I noticed Jackson's car in the parking lot, unusual since he hadn't mentioned visiting from Austin. Curious, I walked toward Dad's office and heard male laughter. The door was partially open. I saw Dad and Jackson hunched over blueprints for our new municipal project, one I had secured and designed. "This approach will save nearly $200,000 on the foundation work," Jackson was saying, pointing to modifications I didn't recognize. "Good eye, son," my father replied, his voice filled with a pride I recognized. "Your fresh perspective is exactly what Franklin needs moving forward." I cleared my throat, and both men looked up, startled. "Magnus." My father straightened. "We were just reviewing the Wilson Creek project." "I see that." I stepped inside. "Interesting, since I haven't seen those revisions. When did you start working on our projects, Jackson?" My brother had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Dad's been sending me some files, just to get my thoughts." "For how long?" The uncomfortable silence that followed told me everything. "About 6 months," my father finally admitted. Jackson has been consulting remotely. Consulting? On my projects? Without telling me? Our projects, my father corrected. Franklin construction projects. That evening, after a tense day of avoiding both men, I returned to Dad's office to discuss the situation rationally. I found him removing my nameplate from the desk I'd used for the past 8 years. A box of my personal items sat on the floor. "What are you doing?" My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "Jackson's taking over your office tomorrow. You'll move to the project coordinator desk." The world tilted sideways. Project coordinator? "Dad, I'm executive vice president." "Was," he said, still not meeting my eyes. "The company's growing, Magnus. We need new blood, new ideas. My ideas built this company into what it is today." Finally, he looked at me, his expression resolute, in a way I'd seen countless times when he'd made an unalterable decision. "The Franklin name needs a man behind it, Magnus. Construction isn't women's work." As the words hit me, I noticed movement behind me. Jackson stood awkwardly in the hallway, holding a new nameplate. Jackson Franklin, Executive Vice President. Sleep evaded me that night. I tossed in bed, replaying 14 years of dedication dissolved in a single sentence. Construction isn't women's work. By 5 in the morning, anger had crystallized into determination. I would not be discarded so easily. I arrived at the office by 6, preparing a presentation of my contributions to Franklin Construction. Financial reports showed 30% growth under my leadership. Project photos documented developments I had secured and managed. Client testimonials praised my attention to detail and problem-solving abilities. By 8, I was waiting in the conference room when my father arrived. "I'd like to discuss yesterday," I began, sliding the folder toward him. "I've outlined my contributions to the company over the past 14 years. He glanced at the papers without touching them. "Nobody's questioning your contributions, Magnus." "Then why am I being demoted?" "It's a lateral move. Different responsibilities. Project coordinator is 6 levels below executive vice president. That's not lateral. That's a cliff dive." Dad sighed, finally sitting down. "The construction world is changing, but some things remain constant. Our clients, banks, developers, city officials, they expect to deal with men, particularly in leadership positions. That's ridiculous. I've built relationships with those exact people for years. As my daughter, with me backing you. It's different when you're the face of the company. So my work, my expertise, means nothing compared to Jackson's gender? Your brother brings fresh perspective and has the respect that comes naturally to a man in this industry." He stood, signaling the end of the discussion. "This decision is final, Magnus. You can accept the new position or find opportunities elsewhere." The ultimatum hung in the air between us. I'd never considered working anywhere else. Franklin Construction wasn't just my employer, it was my identity. "I need to think about this," I managed to say. "Take today. Jackson starts tomorrow." Driving aimlessly to avoid returning to the office, I called my mother. Laura Franklin had always been my confidant and occasional buffer between Dad's old-school methods and my progressive approaches. "Can I come over?" "Dad just demoted me and put Jackson in my position." A pause. "I know, honey. Maybe come for dinner tomorrow instead? Your father and I are taking Jackson to lunch today to celebrate." The betrayal caught me physically, like a punch to the stomach. "You knew? You knew he was replacing me?" "It's not replacing, it's restructuring," she echoed my father's justification. "Your father believes this is best for the company's future. And you agree?" Another pause. "I support your father's decisions for the business he built." After hanging up, I drove to our largest active project, a 12-story office building downtown. Construction sites always calmed me with their ordered chaos, the tangible progress of creating something substantial. Frank Donovan, our site supervisor and my ally for a decade, greeted me with uncharacteristic formality. "Everything okay, Frank?" He glanced around before speaking quietly. "Heard about the changes. Tough break, Magnus. News travels fast. Jackson was here yesterday. introducing himself as the new EVP, talking about his vision for the company. My stomach dropped. Yesterday? Before I even knew? Frank nodded uncomfortably. He also mentioned bringing in some new supervisors, college buddies of his. This went beyond a simple title change. Jackson was already making plans that would affect loyal employees. Back at my car, I called Martin Weathers, our longest-standing client. His development company had worked exclusively with Franklin Construction for 8 years. Magnus, just thinking about you. Had an interesting meeting with your brother yesterday. While I was still believing I had a future at Franklin, what did you discuss? He presented some ambitious plans, talking about expanding into commercial high-rises, even though we've always appreciated your focus on quality over quantity. Did he mention any specifics? He showed projections for doubling company size within 18 months. Mentioned leveraging assets for significant capital investment. Leveraging assets? That meant taking on substantial debt, something I'd always advocated against. Dad built Franklin Construction by growing sustainably, never over-leveraging. Driving back to the office, I found Jackson alone in what was formerly my office, feet propped on the desk, phone to his ear. "Gotta go," he said, seeing me. "Hey sis." "Don't hey sis me. You've been planning this for months behind my back." He had the decency to look uncomfortable. It wasn't my idea. Dad approached me in February, said he wanted Franklin to stay in the family, but needed a man at the helm. And you just agreed? Despite having zero interest in construction your entire life? Jackson shrugged. It's a good opportunity. The company's successful. The infrastructure is in place. Dad said you'd handle the technical stuff while I become the face of the company. That's not what he told me. He's demoting me to project coordinator. Confusion crossed Jackson's face. That's not right. He said you'd stay on as operations director, just reporting to me. I laughed bitterly. Looks like Dad's telling us different stories. Jackson fidgeted with a pen. Look, I never wanted to hurt you. I tried telling Dad this wasn't fair, but you know how he gets when his mind's made up. So you just went along with it? Taking credit for my work? Meeting with my clients? I didn't take credit. Martin Weathers said, you presented your plans for the company yesterday. Jackson at least had the grace to look ashamed. Dad wrote the presentation. He said it would be more convincing coming from me. I paced the office that no longer belonged to me. This is insane. You have no experience. The company could suffer while you learn on the job. Dad says construction is more about relationships than technical knowledge. I'm good with people. Relationships I've spent years building. Jackson sighed, leaning forward. There's something else you should know. Dad's negotiating a loan against the company's assets, $5 million. I froze. What? We don't need that kind of capital. We're debt-free with healthy cash reserves. He wants to expand rapidly before retirement. Says it's now or never. That's incredibly risky. If projects don't pay off immediately, we could lose everything. Jackson lowered his voice. I know. I tried telling him the same thing, but he says this is his legacy moment. As I left the office, the full scope of the situation became clear. This wasn't just about gender bias. My father was gambling with the company's future while pushing aside the one person who might oppose his reckless plans. A week into my demotion to project coordinator, I still couldn't believe how drastically my life had changed. My spacious corner office with views of the city skyline had been replaced by a cramped desk in the open plan area. Instead of leading strategy meetings and client presentations, I was tracking material orders and processing change requests. Most painful was watching Jackson stumble through responsibilities I had handled effortlessly. During his first client meeting, he confused basic terminology, referring to load-bearing walls as the important walls that hold stuff up. The client glanced at me questioningly, but Jackson's charming smile and my father's presence smoothed over the awkwardness. I decided to bide my time, documenting every misstep while continuing to perform my reduced role perfectly. If I couldn't lead through authority, I would lead through example. This approach worked for exactly 3 days before Jackson started excluding me from meetings I should have attended, even as project coordinator. When I confronted him, He seemed genuinely apologetic. Dad suggested it would be confusing for clients to see you in a different role. He thinks it's better if you focus on behind-the-scenes work for now. So I'm being hidden away because it might be confusing? Jackson shrugged helplessly. His words, not mine. Determined to stay involved, I began arriving early to review project files and prepare summaries for team leaders. One morning, I noticed significant changes to the hospital expansion specifications, my largest ongoing project before the demotion. The modified plans reduced structural reinforcement in several critical areas, substituting premium materials with standard-grade alternatives. These changes would save money initially, but create maintenance issues within 5 years. Worse, they contradicted promises I had made to the client about longevity and quality. When I brought this to Jackson's attention, he seemed uncomfortable but firm. Dad approved these modifications last week. The client signed off on them. They couldn't have understood the implications. These changes compromised the building's integrity. They understood they're saving nearly $1 million, Jackson replied. Dad says we were overbuilding before. We were building to last 50 years instead of 20. That was our selling point. Dad says we need to be more competitive on price. Dad says. The phrase I kept hearing to justify every bad decision. Later that week, I discovered my project files had been altered retrospectively, making it appear that cost overruns on previous projects were my fault, rather than the result of client-requested changes. When confronted, my father dismissed my concerns. We're streamlining record-keeping. The details only matter to us internally. Those details are my reputation. The altered files make it look like I mismanaged budgets. He waved dismissively. No one's going to review old project files. Unless they're building a case against me. My father's expression hardened. You're being paranoid, Magnus. Maybe this attitude is why we needed fresh leadership. The final blow came when Westside Medical Center, a client I'd cultivated for 3 years, canceled their contract after Jackson mishandled negotiations for their new surgical wing. Jackson quoted one price initially, then tried adding 20% after we'd already announced the project to stakeholders, explained Carol Winters, their facilities director and my longtime contact. I'm sorry, Magnus. I fought for you, but our board lost confidence. That night, I met with Eleanor Wells, a pioneer among women in construction who had mentored me since college. Now, semi-retired, she listened as I poured out my frustration over dinner. Unfortunately, your story isn't unique, Eleanor said after I finished. I built Wells Construction from nothing, growing it large enough to attract acquisition offers. When I finally accepted one, they promised I'd remain as CEO. 6 months later, I was promoted to a meaningless advisory role while a man half my age took over. What did you do? Fought it legally and lost. The construction industry remains an old boys' club at the highest levels. Courts see construction as traditionally male and don't recognize the subtle discrimination. So I should just give up? Accept that my gender disqualifies me from leading the company I helped build? I'm saying choose your battles wisely. Sometimes the best revenge is building something new that makes them regret losing you. Her words echoed in my mind as I drove home to my apartment, where Thomas was waiting with dinner and wine. My relationship with Thomas had survived my punishing work schedule for 3 years, largely because he worked equally demanding hours as a corporate attorney. Rough day? He asked, noticing my expression. I recounted the latest developments, my voice rising with each new outrage. Instead of the indignation I expected, Thomas seemed contemplative. Have you considered this might be an opportunity in disguise? He asked. You've been working insane hours for years. Maybe this is the universe telling you to reprioritize. Reprioritize what? Thomas reached for my hand across the table. Us, for starters. We're both 30. If we want a family, the timing works now that your career is less demanding. I withdrew my hand, stunned. Less demanding? I've been demoted against my will. I know, and that's terrible. But maybe use this moment to consider what you really want. You've always said the construction industry is merciless to working mothers. So your solution isn't to support my career, but to suggest I embrace discrimination and start having babies? Thomas backpedaled quickly. That's not what I meant. I just thought that I'd finally become a proper girlfriend now that my career is imploding. I stood, anger bubbling over. My father believes women don't belong in construction leadership, and apparently you agree. That's completely unfair. I've always supported your career. No, you've tolerated my career while waiting for me to reprioritize. There's a difference. The argument escalated until Thomas finally snapped. Your father's right about one thing you're too stubborn to see when people are trying to help you. The words hung in the air between us. You've been talking to my father? Thomas looked away. He called me last week, said he was worried about how you were handling the transition. He thought I might help you see the bigger picture. And what picture is that? That you could be happier without the stress of running a construction company. That there are other paths that might suit you better. Everything clicked into place. You never expected this relationship to accommodate my career long term, did you? You were just waiting for me to hit the glass ceiling. Thomas's silence confirmed my suspicions. 3 years of what I thought was mutual respect and understanding collapsed in an instant. I think you should leave. After Thomas departed, I poured through company financial records I still had access to as project coordinator. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Beyond the material substitutions and quality compromises, my father had begun siphoning company assets into a separate holding company, Franklin Family Investments LLC, registered solely in his name. The pattern suggested he was extracting value before his retirement, potentially leaving the company cash poor just as Jackson's inexperience and the over-leveraged expansion created maximum vulnerability. If the business failed after my father retired, Jackson would bear the public blame, while Dad enjoyed the extracted assets. The realization left me sleepless, staring at the ceiling as dawn approached. Everything I'd believed about my father, his integrity, his fairness, his commitment to quality crumbled under the weight of evidence. The man who taught me to take pride in building things properly was deliberately undermining the company he spent a lifetime creating, and he was using my brother as the fall guy, while pushing me aside completely. My demotion continued spiraling downward. 2 weeks after losing my executive position, I was reassigned to manage the supply warehouse, a job typically given to new hires with minimal experience. The fluorescent-lit concrete space filled with construction materials became my daily prison, far from clients and strategic decisions. The warehouse staff, mostly men who had once reported to me indirectly, now watched with uncomfortable expressions as I inventoried drywall and organized fastener shipments. Some treated me with exaggerated formality. Others avoided eye contact entirely. Only Pete Ramirez, our longtime warehouse supervisor who was supposed to report to me in this new arrangement, showed genuine respect. "This is wrong, Miss Franklin," he said quietly one afternoon. "Everyone knows you built this company alongside your father." "Apparently not everyone," I replied, trying to maintain professionalism despite my crumbling pride. "The crews talk. They know something's not right when the most knowledgeable person gets sent to count nails while the new guy makes decisions." His loyalty touched me, but I knew workplace sympathy wouldn't change my circumstances. The company's 35th anniversary gala was approaching, an event I had organized annually for the past decade. This year, I learned about the plans through the company-wide email. My name wasn't even on the planning committee. Through warehouse gossip and fragments of conversations, I pieced together that my father planned to formally announce Jackson as his successor at the gala. The symbolic torch passing would occur in front of clients, employees, and industry peers who had watched me dedicate my life to Franklin Construction. Meanwhile, problems mounted across our projects. Jackson had approved substandard concrete mixtures for the hospital foundation, a decision that saved $40,000, but potentially compromised structural integrity. When testing revealed the concrete hadn't reached proper strength after curing, Jackson blamed the supplier rather than his cost-cutting directive. I documented every concerning decision, building a file of safety and quality issues that threatened the company's reputation and clients' investments. When the hospital project fell 3 weeks behind schedule due to Jackson's mismanagement, I decided I couldn't remain silent any longer. I requested a meeting with my father, bringing evidence of the mounting problems. For nearly an hour, I walked him through specific issues: inadequate materials, missed inspections, improper sequencing of critical tasks, and growing client dissatisfaction. These problems could create serious liability for Franklin Construction, I concluded. The hospital foundation alone could require expensive remediation if not addressed immediately. My father leaned back in his chair, studying me with an expression I'd never seen directed at me before: suspicion. Interesting that these issues all emerged after you left leadership, he said coldly. They emerged after inexperienced leadership took over, I corrected. Or perhaps someone is actively working to undermine her replacement. The accusation hit like physical blow. You think I'm sabotaging projects? I built this company alongside you. You had access to all these projects before transitioning roles. It would be easy enough to create problems that would emerge later. That's insane. I would never endanger people's safety or the company's reputation. Yet here you are, presenting a detailed catalog of failings, just weeks before I announced Jackson as my successor, because these are real problems that need addressing. He gathered the documents I'd presented and placed them in his desk drawer. I'll look into these claims. In the meantime, I think it's best you take a leave of absence. A leave of absence? Dad, I'm trying to help. Your help feels increasingly like interference, Magnus. His expression softened slightly. Take some time, clear your head. Figure out if you can accept the new direction of Franklin Construction or if you need to move on. Security escorted me to collect personal items from my warehouse desk. Pete watched silently, shaking his head as guards treated me like a potential thief in the company I'd helped build. That evening, Thomas called repeatedly. After ignoring several attempts, I finally answered. Magnus, I've been worried. Your father called saying you'd been placed on leave. And you're checking on his behalf? How thoughtful. I'm checking because I care about you. This situation has gotten out of hand. The situation where my father and boyfriend conspired to sideline my career? That situation? Thomas sighed. No one's conspiring against you. Your father believes you've been working against Jackson, possibly even compromising project quality to make him look bad. The accusation, now repeated by Thomas, broke something in me. You actually believe I would sabotage construction projects? Risk people's safety? After 14 years of building my reputation on quality and integrity? I think you're upset and might not be thinking clearly. I think you never knew me at all. I hung up and blocked his number, then spent the night alternating between tears of frustration and fury. The next morning brought news that turned my personal crisis into a public disaster. A section of improperly installed structural steel collapsed at the hospital construction site, injuring 3 workers. None critically, thank God. But the incident triggered an immediate work stoppage and investigation. Though on forced leave, I drove to the site, watching from across the street as emergency vehicles and news crews swarmed the area. Jackson appeared briefly for a statement, looking shell-shocked as cameras flashed. My phone rang. Pete from the warehouse. Miss Franklin, you need to know something. The steel that failed was part of a substitution order Mr. Jackson approved last month. The specs were downgraded from what you originally specified. Are the workers okay? Minor injuries, fortunately. But everyone's saying if the collapse had happened during concrete pouring tomorrow, we'd be counting bodies instead of bruises. My blood ran cold. I had specifically warned about the steel substitutions in my meeting with my father. When my father called an hour later, I expected an apology, or at least acknowledgement that my concerns had been valid. Instead, his voice was tight with controlled anger. The preliminary investigation found evidence of tampering with the steel connections. Tampering? That's ridiculous. Several bolts were loose. Intentionally loose, according to the inspector. Realization dawned horrifyingly. You think I did this? You think I would endanger workers' lives to prove a point? You had access. You had motive. You specifically highlighted the steel structure in your report yesterday. because I knew it was dangerous. I was trying to prevent exactly this kind of accident. Turn yourself in, Magnus. If you cooperate, we won't press charges. We'll call it a mental health episode. Get you treatment. The phone slipped from my numb fingers. My own father believed I would commit sabotage that could have killed people. After everything I'd sacrificed for Franklin Construction, he thought me capable of endangering lives out of petty revenge. Something broke inside me. The final thread, connecting me to the family business and the father I had idolized. Through the numbness, a strange calm emerged. If my father could believe me capable of such a monstrous act, there was nothing left to salvage. I drove home, packed essential belongings, and left the apartment Thomas and I had shared. Within hours, I checked into a hotel across town, my mind strangely clear for the first time in weeks. Franklin Construction, the center of my identity since childhood, was no longer my home. My father, my hero and mentor, now viewed me as a criminal. My relationship had revealed itself as conditional on my career setbacks. Everything I had built my life around had crumbled, and somehow, in that complete collapse, I found the freedom to rebuild on my own terms. The extended stay hotel became my home and war room. With savings from years of six-figure salary, I could afford several months of strategic planning without income. The sparse room with its kitchenette and desk became command central for Operation Reclamation, my private name, for the mission to save Franklin Construction, possibly from itself. First, I needed perspective. I called Eleanor Wells, explaining the full situation including the accident and my father's accusations. Your father's scapegoating you, Eleanor said bluntly. Classic move, when men make mistakes, find a woman to blame. He genuinely believes I could have endangered people. That tells you everything about how he sees you now, not as his daughter or colleague, but as a threat to his plans. Eleanor invited me to her lake house for the weekend. Away from the city and surrounded by nature, I began processing the emotional trauma of losing my family, relationship, and career simultaneously. You're experiencing grief, Eleanor observed as we sat on her deck watching sunrise over the water. You're mourning the death of who you thought your father was. The observation struck deep. I built my life trying to make him proud. And now you discover he valued your contributions only within the boundaries he defined. The moment you became inconvenient to his plans, he discarded you. What do I do now? Eleanor smiled. You stop trying to win approval from people who've shown they'll never give it. You build something that makes them irrelevant. She introduced me to her network of accomplished women who had faced similar discrimination in construction and related industries. Through these connections, I met Diane Walker, a former executive who now ran a consulting firm specializing in construction management. I've followed your work for years, Diane said during our first meeting. The hospital expansion project was particularly impressive, innovative approaches while maintaining historical aesthetic. The project that's now partially collapsed, I noted bitterly. Because someone changed your specifications, she countered. The original plans were exemplary. I've already heard from 3 clients who are nervous about Franklin's quality control since you left. Diane offered me a consulting position, allowing me to leverage my expertise without competing directly with Franklin Construction. I accepted with one condition: no non-compete agreement. I needed freedom for whatever came next. Through consulting, I regained professional purpose while making connections with Franklin competitors. I advised on projects similar to ones I'd managed previously, demonstrating my capabilities to potential allies in the industry. Meanwhile, I monitored Franklin Construction's ongoing projects through former colleagues who remained loyal. Pete from the warehouse provided updates on material deliveries that indicated further quality compromises. Sarah from accounting shared concerns about increasingly desperate cash flow management. The accident investigation concluded with no evidence of tampering, contradicting my father's accusations. Instead, the report cited improper installation and inadequate materials as contributing factors, exactly what I had warned about. Despite this vindication, I received no apology. Jackson left a voicemail expressing relief that I had been cleared of suspicion but never addressed the fundamental injustice of the accusation. 3 months after my departure, Franklin Construction began showing signs of serious distress. 2 major clients canceled contracts, citing concerns about project management and quality control. Subcontractors complained about payment delays, previously unheard of under my father's management. Through industry channels, I learned that my father was pursuing an acquisition offer from Westridge Construction, our largest competitor. The rumored terms suggested a fire sale, rather than a merger of equals. While tracking these developments, I received an unexpected visitor at my consulting office, my mother. Laura Franklin appeared older than when I'd last seen her 6 months earlier. She clutched a large envelope and checked twice that my office door was closed before speaking. "I should have done this months ago," she began without preamble. "I told myself I was being loyal to your father by staying silent, but I was really being a coward." She slid the envelope across my desk. Inside were financial documents spanning years, bank statements, property transfers, and incorporation papers for multiple LLCs. "I've been gathering these for 3 years, she explained. "Your father doesn't know." I scanned the documents, recognizing a sophisticated asset-hiding operation. "He's been moving money out of the company." She nodded. "Harrison started small consulting fees paid to shell companies, equipment purchased from entities he controlled. After he decided to push you out, it accelerated." "Why are you showing me this now?" "Because he's about to sell the company for a fraction of its value after extracting millions. Jackson will be left holding the debt while your father walks away with a fortune hidden in these entities." I studied my mother, seeing her clearly perhaps for the first time. "You're planning to divorce him?" A small smile. "After 35 years, I've finally had enough. His treatment of you was the last straw. Why didn't you stand up for me when it mattered?" "Because I was gathering evidence instead," she replied simply. "I couldn't tip him off by openly opposing him." "I'm sorry for how that hurt you." The documents revealed the full extent of my father's betrayal, not just of me but of the company itself. He had systematically extracted value for years, accelerating as retirement approached. The recent loan against company assets wasn't for expansion, but to create cash he could divert before selling. Jackson doesn't know about this, does he? He suspects something's wrong but doesn't understand the details. Your father keeps him distracted with day-to-day problems, while the real damage happens behind the scenes. "What do you want me to do with this information?" "Whatever you think is right," my mother answered. "I'm filing for divorce next week, regardless. I've secured my own financial future." She reached for my hand. "I failed you once. I won't make that mistake again." After she left, I spent hours analyzing the documents, building a comprehensive understanding of my father's schemes. The picture that emerged was damning: a calculated plan to hollow out the company while using Jackson as the public face of failure. The 35th anniversary gala, where my father planned to officially name Jackson as successor, was approaching in 2 weeks. According to my sources, he intended to announce the Westridge acquisition immediately afterward, presenting it as a strategic alliance rather than a distress sale. That evening, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Magnus? It's Jackson." My brother's voice sounded strained, exhausted. "What do you want, Jackson?" "To apologize, for starters. I should never have gone along with Dad's plan to replace you. Bit late for that realization." "I know. I was arrogant enough to believe I could handle this job." He paused. "Everything's falling apart, Magnus. Projects are behind schedule. Clients are furious. And Dad seems more concerned with retirement planning than helping me fix the mess. Why are you telling me this?" "Because despite everything, I know you care about Franklin Construction. The company has your name too." He wasn't wrong. Despite the betrayal, I couldn't simply watch the company my grandfather founded and I helped build collapse completely. "What exactly are you asking for, Jackson?" "Advice. To start. Maybe more eventually. I'm drowning here, and Dad's checked out mentally. He's rushing the Westridge deal through despite terrible terms." I considered my options. Working with Jackson meant potential reconciliation but also returning to the toxic environment that had nearly broken me. Meet me tomorrow. Neutral location. Bring the acquisition paperwork and current financial statements. After hanging up, I called Eleanor Wells. I need advice on outmaneuvering someone, determined to sell a company out from under its rightful leaders. Eleanor chuckled. Coincidentally, that's exactly what happened to me before I launched my second, more successful company. Come over tonight. This requires wine and war planning. By morning, I had a strategy. By evening, after meeting with Jackson, I had the ammunition to execute it. My brother had arrived looking like a shell of the confident man who had taken my office 6 months earlier. Dark circles underlined bloodshot eyes, and his usually meticulous appearance had given way to wrinkled clothing and unkempt hair. You were right about everything, he admitted immediately. The materials, the scheduling, the financial management. I was completely unprepared. He spread financial statements across the cafe table, pointing out cascading problems, cost overruns, penalty clauses triggered by delays, lines of credit maxed out to cover cash flow gaps. Dad promised he'd guide me through the transition, but he's barely in the office anymore. When problems arise, he tells me to handle them myself, or pushes for shortcuts I know are wrong. The acquisition offer confirmed my worst fears. Westridge would purchase Franklin Construction for approximately 40% of its true value, assuming all liabilities while acquiring our client relationships and equipment at fire sale prices. Dad's rushing this through before the quarterly financials become public, Jackson explained. Says, it's our only option, given the company's condition. I shared some of what our mother had discovered, enough to help Jackson understand the broader picture without revealing her involvement. He's been planning this for years, I concluded, setting up the company to fail after extracting its value, using you as the fall guy while he retires comfortably. Jackson's face drained of color. I knew something felt wrong, but this is beyond what I imagined. The question is, what are you willing to do about it? He straightened, something of his old confidence returning. Whatever it takes. This company has our name on it. I won't let him destroy our family's legacy. For the first time since our childhood adventures, I felt genuine connection with my brother. We'd both been manipulated by our father's machinations, me pushed aside for my gender. Jackson set up to take the blame for the company's engineered failure. Then we have work to do, I said, starting with stopping that acquisition. The Franklin Construction Board of Directors rarely exercised real power. Consisting of my father, 2 retired construction executives who were his fishing buddies, and 1 actual independent director, they functioned mainly as a rubber stamp for my father's decisions. The one independent director, Walter Simmons, had always shown me respect during my years in leadership. As former CEO of an architectural firm, he understood both construction and the value of diverse perspectives. I requested a private meeting, presenting evidence of my father's financial schemes, without revealing my mother as the source. I suspected something wasn't right, Walter admitted, studying the documents. The company's performance didn't match its deteriorating financial position, but these allegations against Harrison are extraordinary. The evidence is clear. He's been extracting value systematically, while setting up Jackson to take the fall for the company's failure. Walter's ethical concerns overcame his loyalty to my father. I'll request an emergency board meeting before the acquisition vote. These issues demand investigation. Meanwhile, Jackson worked to delay the Westridge deal, finding technical reasons for additional review and making himself unavailable for necessary signatures. Our father grew increasingly irritated with these roadblocks, but couldn't force the process without raising suspicions. On Jackson's authority as executive vice president, I returned to Franklin Construction as a special consultant to assess ongoing projects. My first priority was the hospital expansion, still our largest contract, and now significantly behind schedule after the partial collapse. The site visit revealed alarming conditions. Remediation of the collapsed section had been performed hastily. Other structural components showed similar quality issues. The concrete foundation problems I had identified earlier remained unaddressed. I documented everything, creating a comprehensive analysis of required corrections. The estimated cost, $300,000 minimum, would erase any profit margin on the project, but was necessary to ensure safety and fulfill contractual obligations. Jackson presented my findings to our father, who dismissed them as unnecessary gold plating. "We don't have the cash flow for those changes," he argued. "The building will pass inspection with minor fixes." "Barely passing inspection isn't our standard," Jackson countered, echoing words I had said countless times. "And when problems emerge later, our reputation will be destroyed." "There won't be a Franklin reputation to worry about once the acquisition closes," our father replied, revealing his true perspective more clearly than he intended. Jackson recorded this conversation secretly, another piece of evidence showing our father's willingness to compromise quality and safety for financial gain. The emergency board meeting was scheduled 3 days before the gala and planned acquisition announcement. Walter ensured the meeting agenda included a full financial review rather than just the acquisition approval. During those preparation days, I reconnected with key clients who had worked with me previously. Without disparaging Franklin Construction directly, I expressed concern about recent quality issues and leadership changes. Several clients agreed to delay payments or new contracts until receiving satisfactory answers about project management. I also reached out to industry journalists who covered construction and real estate development, sharing anonymous tips about potential quality concerns at major Franklin projects. This created external pressure for transparency, just as we were building our internal case. The board meeting promised to be contentious. My father, realizing something was afoot, arrived with Franklin Construction's attorney, a clear intimidation tactic. Walter opened by requesting a detailed review of the company's financial position before considering the acquisition offer. When the CFO presented standard financial statements, Walter produced the documents I had provided showing discrepancies. "These records suggest systematic fund transfers to entities not included in our financial reporting," Walter noted. "Can you explain these discrepancies, Harrison?" My father maintained remarkable composure. "Those are perfectly legitimate consulting arrangements and equipment leasing agreements. Nothing improper about optimizing our tax structure." The discussion grew increasingly technical as our father attempted to bury the accusations in financial jargon. Just as momentum seemed to be shifting his way, the boardroom door opened. My mother entered, carrying additional files. "I believe these documents will clarify the situation." The shock on my father's face confirmed he never expected this betrayal from his wife of 35 years. "What are you doing, Laura?" he demanded. "Providing evidence that you've diverted over $4 million from Franklin Construction to entities solely owned by you," she replied calmly. "Entities that aren't part of the proposed acquisition." The room fell silent as board members reviewed the damning evidence. Transfer records, bank statements, and incorporation documents created an irrefutable paper trail of financial misconduct. My father's attorney requested a recess to review the new information privately with his client. When they returned 30 minutes later, my father's demeanor had changed completely. "I propose we table the acquisition discussion, pending further financial review," he said stiffly. "There appear to be some accounting questions that require clarification." The board agreed unanimously, effectively killing the Westridge deal's tight timeline. After the meeting adjourned, my father cornered me in the hallway. "You've always been vindictive," he hissed, "but turning your mother against me crosses a line." "I didn't turn anyone against you," I replied. "Your actions did that all on their own." As he turned to leave, I added, "The gala is in 3 days. Will you be announcing Jackson as your successor before or after, explaining the financial irregularities to the board?" His expression confirmed he hadn't considered how the delayed acquisition affected his succession announcement plans. The carefully choreographed exit strategy was unraveling. Later that evening, Jackson called with unexpected news. "Dad just offered me a deal. He'll step down immediately, transfer his voting shares to me, and remove himself from company operations if I agree not to pursue any action regarding the financial issues." He's cutting his losses, I realized, trying to protect the money he's already moved while abandoning the acquisition plan. "What should I do? What do you want to do?" Jackson sighed. "I want to fix the company, make things right. But I can't do it alone, Magnus. I need your help." "Are you asking me to come back?" "I'm asking you to lead with me. Co-executives. your operational expertise, my client relationship skills. Together we might salvage what's left of Franklin Construction. The offer was tempting but incomplete. And Dad? Complete removal from operations. Advisory board at most, with no voting rights or financial authority. I considered the proposal carefully. Working alongside Jackson meant returning to the company that had betrayed me, but also the opportunity to reclaim and rebuild my life's work. There's one more thing, Jackson added. I found something concerning about the hospital project. I think Dad may have knowingly approved substandard materials, even after the inspection flagged them. If true, it's potentially criminal negligence. This revelation changed the stakes entirely. Beyond financial misconduct, my father might have knowingly endangered lives to save money or accelerate his extraction plan. We need to investigate immediately, I said. The hospital takes priority over everything else. We can't let people occupy an unsafe building. Agreed. I've already ordered work stopped until we can complete a comprehensive safety review. The next morning brought another surprise visitor to my consulting office, my father. Harrison Franklin looked older than his 62 years as he lowered himself into the chair across from my desk. The commanding presence that had dominated construction sites and boardrooms alike seemed diminished. You've won, he began without preamble. The board has suspended me pending investigation. Your mother is filing for divorce. Westridge pulled their acquisition offer after getting wind of potential financial irregularities. I maintained a neutral expression. Those are consequences of your actions, not my victories. I built that company from nothing, he continued, as if I hadn't spoken. Worked 100-hour weeks when you were in diapers. Sacrificed everything to create a legacy worth passing down. A legacy you were willing to dismantle for personal gain. He shook his head. You don't understand. The industry is changing. Margins are thinning. I was protecting what I built the only way I could. By stealing from the company? By setting up Jackson to fail? By compromising safety standards we built our reputation on? By ensuring something remained when the dust settled? He snapped, briefly recapturing his former intensity. This industry will chew up family businesses like ours. I was guaranteeing our family's financial future. At the expense of the Franklin name and reputation. At the expense of clients who trusted us. At the expense of workers who could have been seriously injured. My father stood, reaching into his jacket to retrieve an envelope. You've always seen the world in black and white. Sometimes there are only bad choices, Magnus. He placed the envelope on my desk. Jackson wants you back. The board supports it. I won't stand in the way. After he left, I opened the envelope to find his signed resignation as CEO and board chairman, effective immediately, along with transfer documents for his voting shares to be split between Jackson and me. That evening, I met Jackson at the half-completed hospital project. Together, we walked the site with independent structural engineers, identifying every compromise and necessary remediation. This will cost nearly $1 million to fix properly, Jackson observed, looking at the preliminary estimates. And it will eliminate any profit on the project, I added. We exchanged glances, both recognizing the turning point. This decision would define the future of Franklin Construction, prioritize profit, or honor our commitments to quality and safety. We fix it right, Jackson said firmly. Whatever it costs. I nodded, feeling the first genuine sense of partnership with my brother. We fix it right. As we were leaving, my phone rang an unknown number. Magnus Franklin? This is Detective Sawyer with the City Police Department. We're investigating potential criminal negligence at your hospital construction project. We'd like you and your brother to come in for questioning tomorrow. The final twist arrived with perfect dramatic timing. Our father's decisions had escalated beyond civil liability into potential criminal charges, and Jackson and I now stood at the center of the investigation. The police investigation added urgency to our already critical situation. Detective Sawyer questioned us separately about the hospital project, focusing on who authorized material substitutions and when safety concerns were first identified. Fortunately, my detailed documentation proved invaluable. Email records showed I had flagged safety issues immediately and been overruled by my father. Jackson's recent recordings confirmed our father knowingly proceeded with substandard materials even after problems emerged. Based on your statements and evidence, Detective Sawyer concluded, we'll be focusing our investigation on Harrison Franklin's decisions as CEO during the relevant period. We may need additional testimony from both of you as the case proceeds. With the immediate legal threat redirected, Jackson and I faced the monumental task of saving Franklin Construction. The company's 35th anniversary gala, planned as my father's triumphant handoff to Jackson before the acquisition was scheduled for the following evening. We should cancel it, Jackson suggested. The company's in crisis, Dad's under investigation, and we're bleeding cash. Or, I countered, we use it to reset the narrative. Announce our new co-leadership, address the problems head-on, and commit publicly to making things right. The transparency approach carried risks, but offered the only path to rebuilding trust with clients and employees. After consulting with Walter and our mother, we decided to proceed with the gala, but transform its purpose entirely. The following evening, 300 guests gathered in the downtown hotel ballroom. Clients, employees, subcontractors, and industry partners mingled anxiously, aware of rumors but uncertain of details. My father was conspicuously absent. Jackson and I entered together, presenting a united front that visibly surprised many attendees. We proceeded directly to the podium rather than socializing. Thank you all for coming tonight, Jackson began. This isn't the celebration we originally planned, but it may be more important. I stepped forward. Franklin Construction is at a crossroads. Recent leadership decisions compromised the quality standards this company was built on. Projects have suffered. Trust has been damaged. As of yesterday, Harrison Franklin has resigned as CEO and chairman. Murmurs spread through the crowd as I continued. Jackson and I are assuming joint leadership of Franklin Construction effective immediately. Our first priority is addressing quality issues on current projects, particularly the West Side Hospital expansion. Jackson took over. We've identified necessary remediation steps and have already begun implementing them, regardless of cost. Franklin Construction was built on integrity and quality. We're recommitting to those foundational values. We then outlined our recovery plan. Complete transparency with clients about existing issues, third-party quality verification on all projects, financial restructuring to ensure stability, and new leadership processes emphasizing collaboration. This company bears our family name, I concluded. That name once stood for excellence in construction. Jackson and I are determined to restore its meaning, but we can't do it alone. We need your support, your patience, and most importantly, your honesty if we fall short. The response wasn't immediate applause that would have been inappropriate given the circumstances. Instead, Walter Simmons stood and raised his glass. To honesty in the face of difficulty, he said, and to the courage to make things right. The board fully supports Magnus and Jackson in this new chapter. Eleanor Wells rose next. The construction industry needs more leaders with integrity. Tonight, Franklin Construction is showing what that looks like. Gradually, other supporters stood until most of the room had risen in solidarity. Not universal support, several clients and subcontractors remained seated. Their trust not yet restored, but enough to give us hope. In the weeks that followed, Jackson and I implemented our recovery plan with relentless determination. We personally visited every active project site, meeting with supervisors and workers to address concerns. We renegotiated with clients affected by delays, offering transparency and fair compensation rather than excuses. The hospital project became our showcase for the new Franklin Construction approach. I personally oversaw the remediation work, ensuring every safety issue was properly addressed. When the additional costs exceeded our estimates, we absorbed them rather than cutting corners. The financial restructuring proved most challenging. My mother's divorce proceedings revealed the full extent of my father's asset diversion, nearly $6 million over 5 years. Legal actions to recover those funds began, but immediate cash flow remained critical. We gathered the entire staff in the company warehouse, standing on a makeshift platform of construction pallets to address over 100 employees. "We'll be honest, the company's financial position is precarious," Jackson explained. "Recovering from the mismanagement will require sacrifice from everyone, starting with us." I stepped forward. "Jackson and I are deferring our salaries for 6 months, taking only minimum living expenses. We're also personally guaranteeing the company's primary line of credit." We outlined the recovery plan, including temporary project slowdowns, equipment sales, and office downsizing. Most painfully, we announced a 10% workforce reduction, the first layoffs in Franklin construction history. "These decisions break our hearts," I admitted, "but they're necessary to save the 100 jobs that will remain. Everyone affected will receive generous severance and job placement assistance." Pete Ramirez, my ally from the warehouse, raised his hand. "Some of us have been talking. We're willing to take temporary pay cuts if it means keeping more of our people employed." This unexpected solidarity sparked a ripple of nodding heads throughout the warehouse. By the meeting's end, employees had voluntarily proposed alternatives to reduce costs while preserving jobs: 4-day work weeks, postponed bonuses, equipment sharing between sites. Their commitment to saving the company moved me to tears. While financial experts might have recommended more dramatic cuts, we embraced the collaborative approach, implementing a combination of employee suggestions that reduced the necessary layoffs to just 5 positions. 3 months into our co-leadership, the first signs of recovery appeared. The hospital project passed all inspections with commendations for remediation quality. 2 former clients returned with new contracts, citing our transparency during the crisis as the reason for their renewed trust. Most surprisingly, Jackson and I discovered our complementary leadership styles created stronger outcomes than either of us could have achieved alone. My operational expertise and attention to detail balanced his relationship-building skills and innovative marketing approaches. The Franklin construction offices transformed physically to reflect our new partnership. We removed our father's imposing closed-door executive suite, creating instead a shared open workspace where employees could approach leadership directly. The company nameplate changed from Harrison Franklin, founder and CEO, to simply Franklin Construction Building with Integrity since 1989. 6 months after assuming leadership, we gathered the board to present our first quarterly results. The company had returned to profitability, albeit modestly. More importantly, client satisfaction metrics showed significant improvement, and employee retention had stabilized at 98%. Walter Simmons reviewed the numbers approvingly. "You've accomplished in 6 months what many companies couldn't achieve in years. The turnaround is remarkable." "We still have challenges," I acknowledged. "The legal issues with our father remain unresolved, and we're carrying more debt than we'd like. But the foundation is solid again," Jackson added, "both literally and figuratively." The most significant change came unexpectedly during a routine project review. A young female engineer named Alicia presented improvement suggestions for a commercial development. Her ideas were innovative and cost-effective, displaying the kind of thinking we desperately needed. After the meeting, I pulled her aside. "That was impressive work. Have you considered a project management track?" Alicia hesitated. "Honestly, no. I assumed those positions weren't really open to women here." Her words struck me forcefully, revealing a lingering culture issue despite our leadership changes. That evening, Jackson and I conceptualized the Franklin Foundation, a mentorship program designed to identify and develop talent regardless of gender, with specific emphasis on supporting women in construction leadership. "We'll provide training, certifications, and advancement opportunities," I explained to our HR director, "starting with our own team and eventually expanding industry-wide." By our 1-year anniversary as co-leaders, Franklin Construction had not only survived, but begun to thrive with a new identity. The company specialized in complex projects, requiring technical expertise, rather than competing on volume with larger corporations. Our reputation for transparency and quality attracted clients willing to pay premium rates for guaranteed results. The Franklin Foundation launched with 15 participants, including Alicia and women from 5 other construction companies. Industry publications covered the initiative as innovative, bringing positive attention to our rebuilt brand. The legal issues with our father concluded with a settlement that recovered approximately 60% of the diverted funds. Harrison Franklin avoided criminal charges by agreeing to financial restitution and permanently removing himself from the company operations. On a crisp fall afternoon, 1 year and 3 months after our confrontation began, Jackson and I stood watching the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the completed hospital wing. The gleaming structure represented both our greatest challenge and our most significant achievement, a project rescued from potential disaster and transformed into a showcase of quality construction. Dr. Matthews, the hospital administrator who had remained cautiously supportive during the remediation process, approached us after the ceremony. When the problems first emerged, I thought we'd made a terrible mistake choosing Franklin Construction, he admitted. Now I consider it one of our best decisions. The way you handled the crisis showed extraordinary integrity. As we walked back to our shared office, Jackson chuckled. Remember when Dad said the Franklin name needs a man behind it? Every day, I replied. Turns out, what it really needed was the right people regardless of gender. We paused before the newly installed company sign Franklin and Franklin Construction, the ampersand, symbolizing our partnership and the company's evolution. I never thanked you properly, Jackson said suddenly. You could have let me crash and burn after how terribly you were treated. Instead, you saved not just the company but me too. The company has both our names on it. I echoed his words from our first alliance. Some legacies are worth fighting for, especially when you can rebuild them better than they were before. Our father's belief that construction isn't women's work had nearly destroyed everything he built. The painful irony, and perhaps the most satisfying victory, was that a woman's expertise ultimately saved his legacy, transforming it into something stronger, more ethical, and more inclusive than he could have imagined. In the end, the most important construction project wasn't a building at all. It was rebuilding a company culture on a foundation of integrity, respect, and equal opportunity, a structure designed to outlast all of us. Have you ever been underestimated because of who you are rather than what you can do? How did you respond? Did you walk away, or did you stay and fight to prove your worth? Comment below with your experiences of overcoming bias in your career or family. And if this story of fighting for your rightful place resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to see more stories of triumph over adversity, and share with someone who might need encouragement to stand their ground. Thank you for joining me on this journey of determination and redemption. May you find the strength to build your own legacy on your terms.